you've ever given everything for someone, your time, your money, your health, and then watched them turn around and call you a burden, this story is for you. I was 71 years old when my son threw my heart medication to the floor and said, "We're not a charity. Move out already, you leech." And just like that, the boy I raised, fed, prayed for, and protected raced me. But this isn't a story about anger. It's a revenge story, told softly, one paper trail and banana bread at a time. When I was 29, my husband died on a rainy afternoon halfway between a red light and a promise. A drunk driver and a wet road. He never saw it coming. I remember the phone call, the way my coffee cup slipped from my hand and shattered across the linoleum floor like the future I thought I had. From that moment on, it was just me and Ethan. He was only 5 when he asked me, "Mom, are you going to be okay?" And I lied. I said yes. But truthfully, I wasn't okay. I was barely standing. I picked up every shift I could as an ER nurse. Long nights, crying children, sirens that felt like lullabies. I stitched people back together while falling apart myself. I skipped meals, sold my wedding ring to cover rent, and used birthday money to buy Ethan his first real shoes. Shoes that fit, not the hand-me-downs from the neighbor boy. There was never a moment I hesitated. Everything I did was for that boy, and as he grew, I kept telling myself, if I do this right, he'll remember. I patched his jeans with fabric from old pillowcases, made Halloween costumes from thrift store scraps. I stayed up to help him with science projects, even if it meant going to work with 2 hours of sleep. When he got into community college, I worked double shifts and sold my car to buy him a laptop. He didn't know that. He just knew the laptop showed up in time for his first day. Later, when I finally retired, after 42 years in scrubs, I thought maybe life would slow down. I imagined a garden, a small dog, quiet. But then Ethan lost his job. His wife was pregnant. Their credit was a mess, and the house they wanted was just out of reach. He didn't even ask. I offered. Of course I did. I dipped into my pension. $120,000. The lender was hesitant, so I co-signed, but that wasn't enough. The house wouldn't go through without a clean financial record, so the deed was put in my name only, just to get things moving. I figured we'd fix it later. We never did. They said, "It's just a formality." I believed them. After all, what's legal paperwork compared to family? I paid the down payment. I covered the closing costs. I even paid for the moving truck and their first year of insurance. They moved into a beautiful 2-story colonial with a porch swing and room for a nursery. And me? I moved in with them. It wasn't the plan at first, but after a year alone in the house I once shared with my late husband, silence had started to sound like grief. When Ethan suggested I come stay with them, "Just until you feel better, Mom," I accepted. At first it was lovely. I helped cook, cleaned, watched the baby, paid my share of the bills, even when they said I didn't have to. I kept quiet when they argued, smiled when I was expected to. I didn't want to be in the way, so I shrank myself without being asked. That's the thing about mothers. We become experts at making ourselves small, don't we? But slowly, I noticed things shifting. It began with the furniture. My rocking chair pushed to the garage, my keepsakes boxed away to make room. Then came the remarks, "Do you really need the heat on all night? The upstairs is better for the kids. You'll be fine in the guest room downstairs." They called it a guest room, but it was a converted laundry nook with thin walls and the smell of detergent baked into the air. Still, I told myself it was fine. Family adjusts. Family shares. I told myself these things because I wanted to believe that all the years I gave, the blood, the sweat, the sleepless nights, they meant something. That being a mother still carried weight once your children had grown. Then one night, Ethan brought home a new SUV. I smiled and congratulated him, even though I hadn't had a new coat in 4 winters. Another evening, his wife showed me a kitchen remodel plan, marble countertops, custom cabinets. I nodded and said it looked lovely, even though I knew exactly how much they still owed on the house. I knew because I was still paying the utilities. Every month, like clockwork, water, electric, Wi-Fi, all in my name. Still, I stayed quiet, because love, to me, meant not keeping score. But now, looking back, I realized they were. It didn't happen overnight. That's what no one tells you. You don't go from being someone's mother to being their burden in a single breath. It comes slow, like a tide that pulls at your feet for months before you realize you've been standing in water all along. The first time I truly felt it, the shift, I was in the kitchen making Sunday dinner. Roast chicken, green beans with garlic, mashed potatoes, all from scratch. Ethan came downstairs, sniffed the air, and instead of smiling like he used to, he said, "Didn't we talk about cutting down on power use during the day?" I froze for a second. The oven had been on for 20 minutes. "I was just cooking dinner," I said, my hand still on the pan. He sighed. "Yeah, I know, it's just energy costs are up, Mom. Maybe save that for evenings, okay?" I nodded, because what else do you do? But something in me started sinking that day. It was the beginning of them treating me like I was extra, an accessory they hadn't budgeted for. Then came the bedroom. The upstairs room I'd been staying in, right across from the nursery, was cleared out one weekend. No warning. I came home from the store to find my dresser half emptied and my mattress already in the hallway. Ethan's wife, Kelsey, met me at the door with her arms crossed. "We just need more space for the baby, she said. "We thought you'd be more comfortable downstairs near the laundry." More comfortable. Near the detergent and mop bucket. That guest room wasn't a room at all. It was a converted utility space with no closet and barely any airflow. You could hear the washing machine shake the floorboards when it hit spin cycle. I didn't fight. I didn't even speak. I just stood there while they moved me like furniture. And maybe that was the moment I should have said something. Drawn a line. But I didn't. Because I still believed, stupidly, that this was temporary, that my presence in their home still meant something. But it didn't stop there. Next was the thermostat. I used to turn it up at night because my bones ached. But Kelsey began locking the control panel with a passcode. "You sleep with so many blankets, you'll be fine," she told me, smiling like it was a joke. The coffee I liked was replaced with cheaper grounds. The full milk I bought was swapped for almond milk because it was better for the kids. My groceries slowly disappeared, and when I asked if anyone had seen my yogurt, Kelsey said, "We have to make sure there's enough for everyone, Marlene." Marlene, not Mom. That's when I knew things had changed. The title had been stripped quietly, word by word, and I hadn't even noticed. There was a time when I would have laughed at the idea of being a burden. I paid for the roof. I co-signed the mortgage. I even covered the HVAC repair when the system failed last winter. I was still paying the utilities. But suddenly, I was too much, too loud, too present. Kelsey started putting up signs in the kitchen, sticky notes that read, "Already counted" on meal containers. I once caught her moving my medication box out of the cabinet and placing it behind the dryer. "It's just safer away from the kids," she said. Then came the whispers. One night, I passed by their bedroom on the way to use the bathroom, and I heard her voice, low, irritated. "She's always here. It's exhausting." Ethan replied, "I know. It's like she's waiting to die, like a shadow that won't leave." I stood there, barefoot on the cold floor, clutching the edge of the hallway wall, my heart thudding in my chest like it had the night I lost my husband. And the worst part wasn't what they said. It was that they said it so casually, as if they weren't talking about the woman who raised him, as if I hadn't sacrificed everything so they could be comfortable now. It was like my life had been erased, but they kept the receipts. That's the thing about being a mother. People love to honor the idea of it. They post tributes and flowers and captions about love. But when you're no longer useful, you become an inconvenience, a problem to manage, and sometimes, like in my case, a leech. Tell me, if you're listening right now, have you ever felt that? Like your love turned invisible the moment they stopped needing it? If you have, please say something in the comments. Not for me, for someone else reading who needs to know they're not alone, because I promise you, we are not alone in this. Now, where was I? Ah, yes, the pills. It happened on a Tuesday morning. I had reminded Kelsey twice to pick up my refill. She smiled, nodded, promised. But that morning, when I opened the bottle, empty. I knocked on their bedroom door at 6:30 a.m., chest tight, breathing shallow. Kelsey cracked it open, eyes narrow. "It's early," she said. "I don't have my medication," I whispered. "My heart—" She rolled her eyes. "You're being dramatic again," and shut the door. I tried to make it to the kitchen. Don't remember falling. Just remember the cold floor under my cheek and the dog barking upstairs. When I came to, I heard her standing above me. "She's fine," she muttered, always putting on a show. Ethan came down next, rubbing his eyes. "What now?" "She just dropped like a stone," Kelsey said. "Honestly, I think it's just attention-seeking. No one called an ambulance. No one even helped me up. 10 minutes. I lay there for 10 full minutes. When I finally sat up, numb, humiliated, shaking, I didn't cry. I didn't speak. I went back to that damp little room, sat on the edge of my cot and stared at the wall. And right then, I felt something shift. Not a snap, not rage, not even sadness. It was colder, quieter, a settling. I opened the drawer, took out my old notebook, and began to write. House paid with pension, $120,000, HVAC repair, $8,300 monthly bills, 5 years, electric, gas, water, down payment check, confirmed title, deed, my name only, mortgage payments, my account. I listed everything, every sacrifice, every dollar, every proof, because if they were going to treat me like I didn't matter, I was going to remind them who really built the life they're standing on. It's strange how the smallest things can make you disappear. It wasn't the big betrayals that broke me. Not at first. It was the way they'd stopped talking when I entered a room, the way Kelsey started labeling leftovers with kids only, the way Ethan no longer said goodnight. At some point, I realized I hadn't been hugged in months. The woman who once sat by his hospital bed as a child, wiping his forehead and whispering, "It's okay, baby, Mama's here," was now just there. No one said it out loud, but the message was clear. I was a shadow in my own home. I used to meet with my church group twice a month. We'd drink sweet tea and talk about grandchildren and aging joints. One Saturday, I waited out on the driveway for Linda, my best friend for 30 years. She always picked me up. But that day, she didn't come. I called her later, worried something had happened. Her voice on the phone was hesitant, unsure. "Your son said you weren't feeling well, Marlene," she said. "He said, maybe it was time you started preparing to transition into a facility, that you were getting forgetful." I didn't know what to say. I just thanked her for checking in and hung up the phone with my hand shaking. Forgetful? I ran Ethan's finances for a decade when he was in school. I managed patients, tracked meds, filed insurance claims. I was the one who noticed the foundation crack in this house before the inspector did. And now I was being framed as unstable? The next day, I tried to sit on the porch. I liked saying hello to Mr. Jenkins, who walked his dog every morning. This time, when I waved, he nodded with a strained smile and said, "Still here?" I blinked. "Excuse me?" He cleared his throat, looking awkward. "Oh, nothing. Ethan mentioned you were moving out soon. Thought you'd already left." That's when it hit me. They weren't just trying to push me out quietly. They were building a story, preparing everyone around them to see me as a problem already being dealt with, a burden they were being so gracious in helping manage. I wasn't just being erased from the home, I was being erased from their narrative altogether. Meals changed, too. Sunday dinners stopped happening. Kelsey began preparing meals before I got to the kitchen, placing one small plate aside, like I was an afterthought. No second servings, no seat at the table, just a folded napkin on the countertop with my name in Sharpie. Then one day I noticed a sticky note on the fridge. "Do not touch. Calculated for the kids." I wasn't even allowed to open the fridge freely anymore. Then came the night I found my bed dismantled. I came home from a short walk around the block, one of the only times I allowed myself to leave the house anymore, and saw the pieces of my cot leaned up against the garage wall. My blanket was folded, not with care, but in that rushed, dismissive way you fold something before stuffing it into storage. When I asked what was happening, Kelsey said, "We're reconfiguring the space upstairs. The kids need room for their art station. You don't mind sleeping downstairs permanently, right?" I didn't answer. I didn't argue. I just walked into the basement, because that's what it was now. A basement. Concrete floor, one dusty window, a pull-out cot they borrowed from her cousin. And next to the wall, the dog's crate. That night, I lay awake staring at the ceiling beams above me, counting the faint hums of the washing machine, the heater, the life happening upstairs without me. That's when I realized they were waiting for me to give up. Not to die, exactly, but to fade. They wanted a version of me that stayed quiet, stayed still, and didn't need space, warmth, or oxygen. Just a shadow, tucked away politely out of sight. What they didn't know, what they never thought to ask, was that I had been in darker places than this. I've worked nights in emergency rooms where the hallways smelled like bleach and blood. I've pulled people out of wrecked cars with glass in their necks and soot in their lungs. I've watched mothers bury babies and grandfathers take their last breaths. I've held hands with the dying and sat silently with survivors who couldn't speak yet. You don't do that kind of work without growing a second kind of skin. This basement didn't scare me, but the silence did. The kind of silence where no one checks on you. The kind where people walk right past your door like you're not in there. The kind where you fall and no one notices. A week after the bed was moved, I noticed my medications had been tampered with. The labels were smudged, the bottles rearranged. I found one blood pressure pill missing from a refill I had counted twice. When I confronted Kelsey, she gave me a tight smile. "I was just organizing. I didn't think you'd mind." She always knew just how to speak so that I couldn't accuse her of anything, but could still feel completely violated. That night, I started keeping my pills in a pouch in my cardigan pocket. I stopped using the shared kitchen. I began cooking on a hot plate in the basement with ingredients I kept hidden in a tote bag. And when the loneliness grew too loud, I wrote letters, not to anyone in particular, just little notes to myself. "You are not invisible. You paid for this house. You deserve more than this." Each one folded neatly and tucked into a shoebox under my cot. Then one morning, I woke up gasping, my chest tight, my vision blurry. I reached for my pill bottle and it was gone. I had reminded Kelsey the day before to pick up the refill. She smiled, said she'd already done it, but there was nothing. I stumbled to the hallway, knocked on their door. No answer. I knocked again, harder. Finally, the door opened. Kelsey looked at me. No concern, no urgency. "It's 6:30, Marlene. What now?" "I need my medication," I said. "My chest." She sighed. "You're being dramatic again," and shut the door. I made it to the kitchen, barely, but I collapsed halfway. The tile was cold against my cheek. I remember the dog barking and the sound of footsteps upstairs. When I came to, I heard them arguing. "She just dropped to the floor," Kelsey said. "She's fine." "Again?" Ethan muttered. "She does this for attention." No one helped. No one even touched me. I didn't cry. Instead, I crawled back to the basement, my breath shallow, my hands shaking. I pulled out my notebook, and I wrote one more line. "The moment they stop seeing you as human is the moment you stop living among them." And that was it. Not rage, not heartbreak, just decision. There's a moment when something inside you just stops bending. It doesn't snap. There's no dramatic scream, no broken dishes or slammed doors. That's not how women like me operate. We bend until one day we don't. We go quiet in a different way. Not from fear, but from clarity. It happened the night I crawled back to the basement after collapsing in the kitchen. No one asked if I was okay. No one brought me water. They just turned the TV volume up and went about their evening like my body hadn't just been lying on their floor, gasping for air. I sat on the edge of the cot for a long time. The walls down there were bare, save for a photo I had hung, a faded picture of Ethan at age 10, missing his front teeth, arms wrapped around our old golden retriever. That boy had loved me once, But the man upstairs, he didn't even flinch when I couldn't breathe, and that's when I stopped waiting. The next morning, before they woke up, I opened the bottom drawer of my old nightstand. Inside was a rusted tin box I'd brought from my previous home. I hadn't opened it in years, not since James passed. Taped to the underside of the lid was a tiny key. I still remembered what it was for. In the back of the laundry closet, behind a row of unused paint cans, was an old safe. It used to be my husband's. He'd called it our insurance if the world forgets us. The key still turned like butter. Inside were folders, yellowed, worn, carefully labeled in my handwriting. Mortgage deed purchase agreement, home repair receipts, utility bill confirmations, pension withdrawal records, proof of ownership. Marlene Carter, sole owner. Each document like a lifeline, a breadcrumb trail that led back to the truth. And the truth was simple. I owned that house. Not Ethan, not Kelsey, me. They never added their names, never bothered. They were too sure I wouldn't leave. Too sure I had nowhere else to go. Too sure I would always play my part and stay quiet. Grateful for whatever scraps they tossed down to the basement. But paper doesn't forget. Signatures don't lie. And love should never be weaponized. I spent the next few hours scanning each document with my phone, one by one. I emailed them to myself, then saved backups to a flash drive I wore around my neck, like a quiet sword they didn't know existed. That afternoon, I made a phone call I hadn't made in years. Morrison Kane Law Office, this is Roger speaking. Roger, this is Marlene Carter. You handled James's estate after he passed. There was a pause, a kind inhale of recognition. Marlene, of course I remember. What can I do for you? I told him everything, not in a rush, not with tears, but calmly, like a nurse delivering bad news with a steady hand. He didn't interrupt, just listened. When I was done, he asked me to send the documents. I did, within the hour. That evening, he called me back. Marlene, I've reviewed everything. You're the sole legal owner. They have no rights to the property. Legally speaking, they're guests, and if you choose to remove them, you absolutely can. I exhaled slowly, not from relief, from confirmation. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't dramatic. I wasn't some shadow in their house. I was the owner. They were the ghosts. After we hung up, I didn't cry. I didn't yell. I simply stood in the middle of the basement and whispered something to myself. You didn't lose your voice, Marlene. They just stopped listening. But now? Now they would hear me, without me saying another word. That night, I took out a small notebook and began to plan. Not for confrontation, not for revenge, for peace. Find new housing? No. Call Linda. Transfer legal documents to printed form. Write formal notice to vacate. Pack bags quietly over next 7 days. Bake banana bread the morning of departure. Because if they wanted silence, I was going to give it to them. Not in surrender, in victory. Some people leave with a fight. Others, with silence so deep it echoes louder than any scream ever could. I woke up before dawn. The house was still. Upstairs, the same people who had called me a burden were sound asleep, oblivious that this would be the last morning I'd ever make coffee under their roof. I moved slowly, not because of age, but with purpose. I'd been planning this for 7 days. Every sock, every photo, every folded cardigan already tucked neatly into the suitcase hidden behind old coats in the laundry closet. Everything I own now fit into one rolling bag and a canvas tote. When I say everything, I mean the essentials, because I wasn't taking the weight of their cruelty with me. That stayed behind. I put the kettle on the stove, the good one I brought with me from my old house, and started making banana bread, their favorite. Ethan used to beg for it on weekends when he was 12, said it tasted like love. I remembered that as I mashed the overripe bananas and folded the sugar in gently, the way he liked it. The oven warmed the kitchen. I poured 3 cups of coffee. Mine black, Ethan's with sugar, Kelsey's with almond milk, even though I hated the taste. I laid out warm plates, napkins folded, forks placed just right. It was the kind of table I used to set when I still believed I belonged there. And in the middle of it all, I left 2 things. A handwritten note on my nicest stationery. Thank you for finally showing me who you are. A sealed envelope containing the formal notice to vacate, a copy of the deed with my name only, all utility receipts and repair records, a signed declaration from my attorney. They had 48 hours to leave. I gave them more time than they gave me when they dismantled my room without asking, more time than they gave me when I collapsed on their floor and they stepped over me. I didn't wake them, didn't announce anything, just took one last walk through the house. The living room was filled with toys and decor I had helped pay for, the sofa where I had rocked my grandson to sleep. The kitchen wall still had the clock I bought at a church sale 10 years ago, but none of it felt like mine anymore. And that was okay, because something better was waiting, a life not built on silence. Outside, the sun had just begun to stretch over the horizon. Linda was waiting for me at the gate in her old blue sedan. She waved when she saw me, her smile soft, eyes already watery. I brought the good tea, she said as she popped the trunk. We didn't say much on the ride. We didn't need to. She knew. She had been there the first time I fell apart when my husband died. Now she was here as I stood back up, not just as a friend, but as witness to the quiet reclaiming of my own story. Her house wasn't big, but it was warm. There was a guest room with a real bed, a soft quilt, and a window that looked out on a tiny garden with tomatoes and marigolds. I stood in that room for a long time, just breathing. No one was watching me. No one was judging the space I took up. And for the first time in years, I felt human again. That afternoon, I told Linda everything, from the sticky notes on the fridge to the night I collapsed and no one helped. She didn't interrupt, just listened and poured me more tea. When I finished, she set her cup down gently and said, "You didn't leave because you were weak. You left because you remembered who you are." Later that night, I sat by her kitchen window, watching the wind move through the trees. Back at that house, they were probably just waking up, expecting me to be there with breakfast, with coffee, with answers. Instead, they'd find the banana bread untouched, and my seat at the table, empty. I imagined Ethan holding the envelope, reading the words, realizing the roof over his head was never his to begin with. I didn't smile. I didn't cry. I just closed my eyes and whispered quietly, "You don't get to erase the woman who built everything you now stand on." They would call. They would shout. They would accuse. But I had no more apologies to give. No more tears to explain myself. No more space left for people who only saw me when they needed something, because I wasn't just leaving their house. I was returning to myself. Rain came 2 days later, soft at first, then steady like truth falling from the sky. I sat by Linda's window sipping tea, wrapped in a worn quilt she kept folded over the couch. Outside, the world slowed. No shouting, no slamming doors, just the wind moving through the trees the way it always does when something heavy has finally passed. My phone buzzed on the table. Ethan. Then again, Kelsey. Then a voicemail. "Mom, what is this letter? What's going on?" I didn't listen to the whole thing. I didn't need to. That house they thought they owned, the one I helped build, pay for, repair, and care for, it was no longer theirs. Later that week, the sheriff posted the final notice. 30 days. That was the grace period I gave them. I could have demanded less. But I wasn't like them. They tried to fight it, of course. Claimed squatters' rights. Said I was unstable, vindictive, manipulative. But the paper trail didn't lie. Not the deed, not the utility bills, not the mortgage receipts in my name. I sold the house 2 months later, not to a developer, not to someone who'd tear it down. I sold it to a woman named Sherry, a single mom with 2 kids, working at the post office, who'd been saving for years. She said she used to pass the house every day and dream of making it her own. I gave her a price she could afford. When we signed the papers, she cried. "I'll take care of it," she whispered. "I know you will," I said. Ethan came back one last time. He stood on the porch with a brown paper bag and dark circles under his eyes. Sherry answered the door. He asked if I was there. She said no. Then he asked if he could buy the house back. I can pay more, he said. Please, I need it back. She looked him dead in the eye and said, You lost it the moment you forgot who she was. And then she closed the door. These days, I wake up with sunlight on my face. I walk barefoot in the kitchen, I plant tomatoes, I volunteer at the women's center down the road, and help women like me, forgotten, silenced, quietly strong, read their own deeds, their own names. Sometimes Ethan texts, Mom, I'm sorry. But I don't answer. Not because I'm cruel, but because I've chosen peace. I am not a shadow. I am not a leech. I was the foundation. And when I left, the whole house fell. Now, I'd love to hear from you. Have you ever felt erased, even after everything you gave? Leave a comment, tell your story, or just say, I see myself in her. Because if you do, you're not alone. Not anymore.